Today is our second day of class, and I know some of you may have had trouble receiving uh, the video from the first lecture on time, but I think I've solved the problem. And so what we'll be doing is these videos will be shorter, more episodic, but there'll be a cluster of them put together for each day. So today's lecture will focus on what I've been describing as the African American vernacular. And the African American vernacular is quite specifically trying to pay attention to the notion, to the concept um, that African American literature um, has been developed around a series of um, oral forms of knowledge generation and knowledge sharing and knowledge sustenance, which would then, as we'll see later on, will then translate into a kind of aesthetic and a kind of poetics that would drive the literature that would follow. And I'm defining the vernacular in multiple ways. It would include, and these are the categories we'll be looking at today. It would include the Negro spiritual or the spiritual songs and spiritual entities. It would also include another musical form called the blues, which we'll spend some time looking at. And these would be largely in sequential order and chronological order. It would include folk songs. There are many folk songs that existed. Some would have been come to be called blues songs or spirituals, but they in fact were not necessarily spiritual songs in the way that we're defining the Negro spirituals and the way that Negro spirituals became to be understood and have come to be understood. And then it would also include the slave narrative, which we'll be devoting a significant amount of time to later on in the week. And these are the means of the vernacular. Amongst those would be speeches that have survived over time, speeches that were either transcribed, recorded, or speeches that have been spoken about. But what we are developing is a framework for African American traditions that were important. Of course, there are multiple other means of traditions, curses, proverbs, and folk wisdom that came out of the society and so on, that were retained among African American communities, slave communities, and that became very important. So, so really, we're now looking at a period in which the first set of African Americans who would come to this country would arrive here in about 1690, 1650 to 1690. There've been various dates, but we knew that the Jamestown settlement was one of the first settlements of colonial America, and as early as that time, Africans were part of those settlements. I wanted to say something that I hadn't mentioned in my earlier talk, which I think is very important in understanding the evolution and the construction of African American experience and the ways in which this experience has been significantly curtailed, affected, and shaped by the circumstances surrounding slavery. One of the things we presume is that slavery, that we understand to be slavery, that is, slavery of North America, slavery of Southern America, and of course the Caribbean, was a known thing, or a thing that had already been sort of defined and constructed, and just was consistently understood at the same time.